And Between Bells back, friends, on Cheddar News, I'm Baker Machado, and Climate Week has kicked off. It coincides with the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly, that where world leaders and ambassadors assemble to address a continuing pandemic and climate change as well. Now, when it comes to combating climate change, our next guest is taking action. As former Congressman and presidential candidate John Delaney is relaunching Congressional Bank as Forbright Bank. The new banking brand aims to accelerate the transition to a clean energy economy. So joining us now is the founder and executive chairman, John Delaney. John, good to have you back here on Cheddar News. So let's talk about Congressional Bank getting a big rebrand. Walk us through the focus moving forward for this new one for you.
Sure, it's great to be back with you, Baker. So Forbright Bank is going to be the first bank in the country that's really mission aligned around decarbonization. We're going to dedicate more than half of our assets to financing companies that are pursuing sustainability or decarbonization strategies. And, I quite frankly think the world needs a bank like this. We have a huge challenge to get to net zero by 2050. And right now there's no bank, and we all know how important banks are to the financial system, that is focused on that mission and supporting companies that are doing that. So we're really excited about playing our part in getting the world to net zero by 2050.
Awesome. So let's talk about some of the partnerships you got here, John. You guys have teamed up with Mosaic. That's a solar home improvement financing platform. But when it comes to potential partnerships for you guys, what do you guys look for when it comes to helping customers while also addressing the climate issue here?
So Mosaic's a perfect partner for us because Mosaic is we think the leading residential solar lender in the country. What that means is when people put solar panels on their roof, they often borrow money to finance it, just like you get a home mortgage. And Forbright Bank is going to buy billions of these loans from Forbright and create more capacity for Mosaic to actually make more loans. And so we're teaming with all types of companies like that are helping to finance the green economy and being what we think will be the indispensable partner for them. We'll be working with clean energy companies, electric vehicle manufacturing companies, companies making charging stations, manufacturing businesses that are trying to reduce the carbon footprint in manufacturing, building supplies, financing loans on commercial office buildings so they can be energy efficient, all the things that we need to do to get to net zero. I mean, Baker, you know this, people think we have to spend $3 to $4 trillion a year as a world between now and 2050 to completely change our economy so that it's net zero. Maybe the governments can do $1 trillion of that. The rest has to be done by the private sector. And so Forbright wants to be the bank that's financing the private sector to do that. It's a big idea. It's a big mission, but we're really serious about it.
Yeah, and do you think because of your experience in government is going to help the private sector be able to get that? Because you're right, those are very ambitious goals that the Biden administration has really laid out to get to that, to get to those initiatives. Do you think your sort of policy experience in the government helps you with this?
Totally. Listen, before I ran for office, I started 2 financial services companies and took them public and ran them as the CEO. And then I served in Congress for 6 years, and climate was one of my main areas of focus. So what has to happen to actually meet this goal is the government and the private sector have to work together. And my background is the CEO of 2 financial services companies, now someone who's launched Forbright, plus serving in Congress. I kind of understand how those things come together, because we're not going to we're not going to do what we need to do unless we collaborate. The government and the private sector have to collaborate together. And also, Baker, all the companies in the private sector have to collaborate together. This is not a time for competition. It's a time for collaboration if we want to decarbonize by 2050, which we have to. And we're going to hear about it all week during Climate Week.
Absolutely, indeed, especially given the fact that the UN in that report earlier on said that, we have to take huge changes by 2050 to avoid cataclysmic sort of changes when it comes to the environment. But from a consumer perspective, John, I mean, we even purchase brands most likely that fit sort of a lifestyle or an idea that we really want, especially when it comes to climate. Do you almost think that gives you a leg up almost in a sense? Because as you mentioned, there are no banks that are looking into this.
Right. And so Forbright is an FDIC insured bank like every other bank in the country. So if you put your money in JP Morgan, if you put your money in Forbright, it has the same risk. In other words, it has no risk because it's government guaranteed. So what we want to do is also be a bank that enables consumers, individuals, companies to put their money in a bank, and they know that the money's being used to decarbonize the world. And that's the kind of connection we have to make. I mean, people as consumers have to drive change. We have to drive it in terms of the things we do in our day-to-day lives. We ought to be supporting businesses that are pursuing decarbonization. We ought to be trying to reduce our own carbon footprints. And we ought to be putting our resources against this challenge any way we can. And we think an easy way for people to do that is to put their money in a bank that's actually then going to lend it out to decarbonize the world. It's really pretty simple, actually.
Yeah, so obviously with your experience in Congress, I'd love to get your take on the president and his speech today at the UN, essentially saying that the U.S. is basically going to mobilize $100 billion to support climate action in developing nations out there to help all these other countries out there. And you mentioned, obviously, the goals of 2050 also very important. Do you believe that the president is doing enough right now to really try to attack and go after climate change here?
Totally. I think the Biden administration has been spot on. If you go through their policies in terms of how they want to reimagine the economy, and by the way, create a lot of jobs in doing it, I think they've been spot on. The problem isn't the administration. The problem is the Congress, obviously. But, look, I think what the president did today was terrific. I mean, the United States needs to lead, and that's what he's doing, because this is a global problem, and we've got to get the whole world working together. And let's face it, a lot of people are. I mean, there's entrepreneurs out there with fabulous ideas as to how to change different industries that produce a lot of CO2. There's investors BlackRock invested in Forbright, and BlackRock, as you know, has been a big advocate. Larry Fink has been a big advocate of making decarbonization central to how they think about investing. So you have capital coming together, you have entrepreneurs coming together, you have innovators coming together. And then we need policymakers as leaders. And I think the president is really showing the kind of leadership we need. The Congress is the problem. I mean, we still got all these people in Congress who are climate deniers, right? So that's the big obstacle. The Biden administration has been kind of spot on, in my opinion.
All right. John Delaney, good to always have you back here on Cheddar News, John. He's the founder and executive chairman of Forbright. Thanks so much for joining us again, John.